We're on to South Carolina. What's up, everybody? This is the Sooners on SI Weekend Preview. I'm John Hoover. That's Ryan Chapman. Sorry, that was my best Bill Belichick. Hard to say because the Oklahoma Sooners are pretty much, I think they're over talking about the Texas game. I think they want to turn their attention to the next game, the next opportunity, shall we say, and that is the South Carolina Gamecocks coming to town, Norman, Oklahoma, Saturday morning, 11:45 kickoff, SEC Network. Okay, now let's talk about Texas. Ryan, Oklahoma comes back from Dallas, my man, with their tail between their legs. They have just been whipped for like peeing on the floor. It's 34-3. This is a game where Texas was the superior team. We knew Texas was the superior team coming in. And yet, false hope. OU leads 3-0 at the end of the first quarter. Should have been 6-0. And with about 3 minutes till halftime, it was 7-3. Probably should have been 7-6 at halftime, Ryan. But two defensive drives with 11 missed tackles, two fumbles at the end of the first half. And the actual score probably should have been something like 28-3 instead of 21-3, right? Or 28-6, right? So now we spin it ahead. Sooners are 4-2. They're 1-2 in the SEC standings. Woof. They're not ranked. They've got South Carolina coming to town this week. South Carolina, who shocked Kentucky and probably should have beaten both LSU and Alabama. South Carolina, Ryan, who we thought would be the worst team in the SEC, they're coming to OU this week with a top 15 defense, and they're probably thinking there's no way they don't walk out of here without a win, Ryan.
Yeah, it's bizarro world. You thought when the schedule came out, maybe Mississippi State, the worst team in the SEC, Vanderbilt, but South Carolina, the worst team on Oklahoma's schedule. And now you look at it and all of the issues that Oklahoma has had, the offensive line, injured, not performing at a high level, all the freshman wide receivers having to play, the running backs not having to run a room behind the offensive line. You got young quarterbacks that are seeing ghosts. And suddenly you got a team top 15 in tackles for loss, top 10 in sacks. This is a really, really, really bad defensive matchup for Oklahoma's offense if you're trying to have a little bit of a get-right week. Maine seems a long ways away. And who the important thing is, every other SEC team on Oklahoma's schedule, the South Carolina team's no slouch. They may still be the worst team left on Oklahoma's schedule in the SEC as everybody else is ranked. You're 4-2. You don't win this one. Missing a bowl game is a real reality that Oklahoma could be in come about 9 p.m. Saturday night. So there's a lot that needs to go right. It's a lot of pressure probably to put on a true freshman and Michael Hawkins Jr., but that's the situation, and that's the hole that Oklahoma's dug themselves despite the fact that they're sitting at 4-2.
Yeah, Brent Venables has said it at least 3 or 4 times this week, maybe more. I think it was Grayson Halton said it, I don't know, 7 or 8 times in his little interview that he did. We got to get better. That's where Oklahoma's at. They got to play better on offense. They got a lot better on offense. They got to play better on defense. Ryan, we talked about it pretty much all week. Oklahoma's got to fix one of the worst offenses in the country, and not just this year. They're bordering on some historically bad numbers, Ryan. Worse than, can't believe I'm saying this, worse than John Blake's 1998 team. Frankly, this is where Brent Venables earns his $8 million a year, Ryan.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing, right? Year 3, Brent Venables took over one of the worst defenses, if not the worst defense in school history. It has been fixed. But now he may be the architect. Maybe that's not fair. Seth Luttrell, though, may be the architect of Oklahoma's worst offense in school history, certainly the modern history of the school. That is, again, it seems like hyperbole. It is not. That's how bad it is, and how Brent Venables, what his story at Oklahoma ultimately ends up being, who in large ways is going to be shaped by what the offense does over these last 6 games, what it does this next offseason, and what the offense looks like heading into 2025. Because if this thing doesn't get fixed, historically bad units usually end with unfortunate stories at the University of Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm. Somebody getting fired, basically. Yeah. Ryan, we're looking ahead to South Carolina, as I said at the top. South Carolina comes in here, a team has 37 seniors on the roster. It's number 2 in the nation, number 1 by far of all the Power 4 teams. 28 players have already earned their college degree. That's the most in the SEC. Some have earned more than 1 degree, right? 10 guys on this roster were playing college football in 2019, pre-COVID, Ryan. This is a very, very mature football team, led by a hungry coaching staff, I think. This is the first meeting in the history of the programs, but why should they be intimidated coming to Norman, Oklahoma? Why shouldn't they think that they're going to walk out of here with a win?
Well, while they're veteran at a lot of places, who they're young at perhaps the most important, and that's quarterback. Lenora Sellers is a redshirt freshman. He would be on the same track as Jackson Arnold, a little bit more experienced than Michael Hawkins Jr. And while Lenora Sellers has had some incredible moments, especially on the ground, he's looked like a freshman in one very key area. That's the turnover department. He's thrown 4 interceptions, basically one a week when he's played since the season opener against Old Dominion. It's even worse when it comes to the fact that he has put the ball on the turf. He's fumbled it 7 times. That is a bad recipe for a team taking on an Oklahoma defense that we've not talked much about this week because it's been good. Could it have been better against Texas? Sure, in spots, but it was good enough to keep Oklahoma in that football game. And they do what they do, right? They force a ton of fumbles. They intercept the ball. They take advantage when the ball is overthrown. Look at what Billy Bowman did on the 3rd play of the game against Texas. That was a diving interception. Could have easily just been a punt. Instead, it was great field position. So that's what South Carolina is going to be up against. In weird ways, these teams kind of mirror each other, lean on the defense, and they're both going, dear God, offense, don't set the other team up at the plus 30. That's not going to end well. South Carolina has those same issues. They're actually worse when it comes to the turnover specifically. They move the ball better than Oklahoma's offense, but they give it away at a much higher rate, and that's going to be the cost, especially if they turn that thing over early. You mentioned a desperate South Carolina coaching staff. This Oklahoma fan base, I think, is going to be desperate for a win. They know what's at stake. It should be rocking early. That may dissipate, but if you roll out there and on possession 1, play 3, turn the ball over, it's going to be a whiteout crowd. It might turn into what seems like a blizzard in October for Lenora Sellers as he tries to sift through and make sense of everything in Norman.
Yeah, now South Carolina is averaging 175 yards a game on the ground. They got 243 against LSU. LSU's not great defense, but still 243 yards rushing against LSU in a conference game. Pretty impressive. They also average 187 per game passing. You mentioned Lenora Sellers, a real dynamic dual threat quarterback. Rocket Sanders is the running back, 1,400 yards at Arkansas 2 years ago, all SEC. He may be just now rounding into form from an injury, but Mazeo Bennett is the guy downfield that they like to throw the ball to, although the receiver core is kind of by committee. You get this. Oklahoma opened as a 7.5-point favorite. That line has now moved to as low as OU by 1.5 points. It's moved a full touchdown in South Carolina's favor. So take a look at the schedule. Take a look at this South Carolina team. And what Ryan said is right. This Oklahoma team is now taking a very cautious, deliberate, week-to-week approach to just getting bowl eligible and finishing 6-6. That would be an accomplishment, okay? Beating South Carolina, beating Maine, and then trying to navigate the rest of the schedule. Other than getting Deion Burks back, Ryan, maybe Jalil Farouk at some point. Is there anything Brent Venables can do at this point to turn this thing around and not have the season spin out of control?
Offensively, it really feels tough. Now, here's the thing, and it's something that you asked about on Tuesday. 2005, 2009, for 2 very different reasons, Oklahoma had to play a lot of young guys. A lot of guys graduated out of those 03, 04 teams. 09 feels a lot like this. They were so injury plagued. It's a bunch of young guys. They are allowed to get better. Execution was the name of the game. That execution can get better. Guys, light bulb turns on at different times. Not everybody is Eli Bowen, who walks out there as a true freshman and is absolutely sensational on top of it. So can they get better? Can they get healthier? Absolutely. I think the worry is the confidence gone by the time that happens? What does that do, especially when you're dealing with a young quarterback? We'll see. The good news is I think they have a very, very talented defense to hang their hat on. It's just got to be at a point where it's not protecting the defense, but you can't do the harm of fumbling twice inside the 2-minute warning and getting it to where the defense doesn't matter. So I think it can get better. I just don't think anyone has any faith.
Yeah, those seasons were coming after championship type seasons, Heisman type seasons, record greatness at Oklahoma in 04 and 08. And what do? They turn around and they struggle the following year. They made it to the Holiday Bowl and they made it to the Sun Bowl. And I can say I was on the field at the end of both of those games. And Brent Venables looked like Jim Valvano. He was running around looking for somebody to hug. He was high-fiving everybody. He actually grabbed yours truly and picked me up off the ground. He hugged the sports writer like I did something good. I don't know. He was in a mood after that Sun Bowl in particular because those were tough teams that they ended up beating. Came together, like you said, at the end of a season. And I saw him kind of spark to life a little bit in the press conference yesterday when I brought those teams up. He talked about his daughter being born back in Norman while he was in El Paso, talked about some good memories. And he said, those are two of the funnest seasons I've ever had as a coach. The team wasn't great, but you close the door on losing, you open the door on winning, and you come together as a team, you pull together. Good things happened. And you know what? It wasn't long after that the Oklahoma ship was sailing, back where it's supposed to be. So we'll see if this team has some, I don't know, late season magic in it. Maybe they'll make a few changes. I mean, you think about both those teams, they needed to make some changes. They did. They got better. Like you said, teams are allowed to get better. So we'll see where that takes this team, Ryan.
Yeah, it'll be fascinating because it's one of those. This could be. I don't know if it's the biggest game of the Brent Venables era. I think to a certain extent, Texas a year ago was a bigger game. I think that Tennessee and Auburn and Texas this year, all three were much bigger games. This might be the game that defines the next year and a half of the Brent Venables era, though, because if they're able to find a way, able to bounce back, able to be resilient, that's where that process starts to get better and better. You lose this one, guys might start really checking out, looking at the schedule, not a non-ranked team left on their SEC schedule as of today, this week's AP poll. That's where if guys start mentally checking out, what does that scene look like in the off season? What does that leave you for 2025? This game might go a long way when we look back in 2026, whether Brent Venables is uber successful or not, might point back to this game and say, this was a sign of wherever this thing goes.
Yeah, checking out in 2024 might mean actually opting out for some people. So something you got to keep an eye on. Maybe they'll get it turned around. We'll see. Thanks, Ryan. Good stuff as always. Oklahoma Sooners on SI.com. That's where you'll find our wall-to-wall coverage of OU football all week long. Saturday, we're going to have our pregame coverage. We're going to have all the latest breaking news, up-to-date injury reports. We're going to have our world-famous in-game live blog and observations. We'll have post-game interviews with players, coaches, as well as our own post-game reaction from the field and the Sooners on SI podcast, certified fresh from the press box. Per usual, we're going to have 3 people at the South Carolina game. Don't forget, all of our content is free. All you got to do is keep it right here. Oklahoma Sooners on SI.com. For Ryan Chapman, I'm John Hoover. We'll see you guys.